Hi there. So, this is a series going into the whole, or at least the Redwall books. Maybe not all of them. There are a few of them. I do have a lot of them. I have the whole like standard series plus the cookbook. May do the cookbook one every now and again. I'm kind of there's some delicious looking stuff in there. Anyways, yeah, this is the first. I'm gonna talk about Redwall. Oh boy, oh boy. And yeah, it was written by Brian Jakes, and he passed away. It's been 12 years since he passed away. And this book, not this physical book, but this book in particular actually got me really into reading. I remember we had a reading class, and my reading teacher would see me just kind of not doing anything. Just kind of whatever. And she suggested this for me, and I was and still very appreciative of it. And yeah, I fell in love with it. I love the typical stuff that a lot of people gravitated towards with Jake's writing, and that's the descriptions, the food, and just the willingness to not shirk away from either violence or very, very vivid violence, or the just that sometimes the sometimes to solve the problem of bad guys, they need poked with a sword or get squished by a bell. I don't know, just that plus the fact that Jakes wrote these. I have it somewhere around here. The children he wrote this initially for the Royal Waiver Tree School of the for the blind. So there are a lot of descriptors there that touches on a bunch of different senses and stuff, which is fantastic. The not shirking away from death, as well as writing stories for younger audiences where the language is not I don't want to say dumbed down, but simplified. That to me, because there are words even just in the first book where you're like, oh, okay, like these are not normal words that you would think to say, but I think that's showing a respect for the reader, and I think it would be good to do that sort of thing, respect, but also a standard to be like, hey, this is what I'm throwing at you, come along or not, that's your call. So, yeah, and we're gonna start. I'm gonna review these books through release order, not the story chronological order. So we're gonna start off with Redwall. But yeah, so this book was released in 1986, way back when, and something I do appreciate about it is, before getting into the book proper and everything, I always really like the little, as what will happen is throughout the series, a little bit of adjustments to where things are, which is alright. That's fine. That doesn't bother me. I always like the maps, and I know I mentioned about the description of foods and stuff, but I also really like the the poems or the songs and stuff. And the one, the rhyme that really kind of sticks out as being really, really important, like how it just starts it off here. It's like, who says that I am dead? Knows not at all. I am that is, two mice within Redwall. The warrior sleeps twixt hall and cavern hole. I am that is. Take on my mighty role. Look for the sword in moonlight streaming forth. At night, when day's first hour reflects the north. From over the threshold, seek and you will see. I am that is, my sword will wield for me. And yeah, it's really, really nice. And what's great is, being the first book, it allows to start planting these different sorts of seeds of, Redwall itself, the Abbey, the history of it, having the legend of Martin the Warrior. But this, you start off with Matthias, good old Matthias the mouse. All the wonderful anthropomorphic creatures and critters abound there. There's Constance the Badger. You get a hare, Basil Stag, Jess the squirrel. Like you start like already there's an idea from this book of how these different sort of creatures are, and for better and for worse, a lot of people aren't too keen on. Well, you know what they're, how they are. This is a bit tropish, but I don't know. I don't really have a problem with it myself. It doesn't bother me more than anything. Things are already like anthropomorphic. I more so see it as like the character, like the quality of the character is kind of what puts them there. And even then, maybe some people are like, it's pretty similar, but I don't know. I like it. Gosh darn it. But yeah, so you have this little monk mouse, we'll say, just kind of a squire, kind of starting off, that doesn't have parents and is being raised in this abbey with Matthias, and everything's all sorts of nice. There's a little bit of a jubilee for the abbot, a little bit of celebration, and then all of a sudden, as trouble is wont to do, there is a band of rats. I think mostly rats. I think there might be some stoats and stuff they certainly add into the mix a little bit later, but with ferrets and whatnot. But they, led by Clooney the Scourge, who is just all sorts of just vile, and even in the front of the book as the enticer, as he's threatening the abbot to relinquish Redwall, give it to him and stuff, and then he's told to kind of bugger off. I'll read this little paragraph here. Clooney sneered and turned to his... If I can learn how to read. Clooney sneered and turned on his heel. Then die, all of you, every male, female, and young one. You have refused my terms. Now you will suffer the punishment of Clooney. You will beg on your knees for death to come swiftly, but I shall make your torment loud and long before you die. Kind of, that's a pretty bold statement to be making. And that's something that I do appreciate, because so the story for Redwall, this first book, is Matthias learning to become a hero. Not only that, but also Redwall kind of rediscovering itself in a way, or the heroic side of itself, because it is slipped into, at least as this story is, it's sort of slipped into this, nothing wrong with it, but being this very nurturing sort of community for Redwall and the surrounding Moss Flower Woods. However, when violence or baddies come, this is when you have to have the healers that you need as healers, but then you also have to have the ones that stand up. So, people like characters like Jess the Squirrel. She comes in a bit later, but she does everything that she can to help, by climbing the abbey to try to find Martin the Warrior Sword, as well as stealing this little part of the tapestry that had been stolen, getting it back. The same thing with like Basil Stag. He helps at various times, as well as some of the others in the community. Constance the Badger, she's just like, okay, Badger rage kind of thing. But yeah, it's a story of Matthias learning to be this hero, doing these great things, not only just in the physical sense, but also befriending Sparrowhawk and Warbeak, as well as learning to negotiate, learning to keep your mouth shut, and then when to talk, and then when to try to figure out plans and stuff. Having this development, it gets a bit quick towards the end of it. So as Clooney keeps on attacking Redwall and then failing, and trying in sneaky ways and stuff. And that's just something I actually do like about this book in particular, is that the bad guys, a lot of times they've, and throughout the series as well, a lot of times they'll fail, and sometimes that failure is simply because of bad luck. And same thing with the heroes. The heroes will have bad luck. So even though you can be like, good will kind of, it'll get through, sometimes it's like, well, there is loss on the good guy's side. Like, one of the characters that is really close to Matthias, who they work together to try to solve the riddle that I'd read, as well as just different things going on. Methuselah ends up dying to a fox that had been helped. Good old chicken hound. But he ends up passing away, and the abbot ends up dying as well. And the last final, like outside of the fight between Clooney and Matthias, Clooney the rat, Clooney the scourge, the fight's really, it goes back and forth, and it's a bit more detailed and stuff. And that's something about the pacing of these chapters, right? The chapters are generally on the shorter end, but then when they get longer, it sort of draws the tension out in a really nice way that I like and appreciate. I mean, it can still, it's 300, what's this? This version's 351 pages. It is a swift 351. Like, even if you're not acclimated to reading very often, it goes pretty well. And plus, just the language is really, really enjoyable. There are certain times where you can kind of pick out where it's like, maybe might want to try to like figure out a different phrase here and stuff. I will say this: the food is not nearly as prominent. I mean, it's there, but the feast stuff doesn't feel nearly as strong as I remember in some of the other books. But yeah, so as Matthias is going through all this, there are struggles and failures and successes for both the big, like the draws, like the bigger battles, as well as the smaller battles. And that's something I really appreciate, is there's the macro and then the micro, and being able to bounce between both the good side and the bad side. And sure, the bad side can get laughably bad, or just like, oh, okay, sure, whatever. But it's just really, really nice. It's nice to get those different things going on. Plus, the bad guys do succeed at times, which is, you want that. You want the bad guys to succeed at times, because if they're always failing, then it doesn't quite have that tension, especially what you're trying to go for. Because just sometimes you're just not lucky, and you're just not gonna win, and you're just like, okay, so you gotta figure out how to get out of the situation you then put yourself in. Like I said before, this came out in 86, so to have something a little bit more, I guess, for younger audience, that's a bit more reading involved. Maybe not so much, depending on people reading now. Like, the reading habits today are just such a skewed thing, because there are people who are super into reading, and so that's all the thing. But there are now a ton of different ways to spend your downtime. At least reading books, might skew on the lower end of things. Anyways, yeah, so Matthias is going about trying to find all the different things relating to the Martin the Warrior character, which is sort of like the hero character of Redwall. And so he needs to find the scabbard, belt, the sword, and then the shield, as well as just the tomb of like where he's buried and stuff. And it's the puzzles with it, they seem to solve them a little bit too quickly, maybe, because it's usually just a very, compared to some of the other chapters, an elongated chapter. But yeah, I mean, sometimes it's kind of, sometimes, it's the luck of just kind of falling into it that it might seem like a little bit lazy in that way, but it can work. It works here. Like, I think at one point Methuselah and Matthias are trying to figure out something, and Matthias says something about, oh, it's all mixed up. I don't quite get it. It's a jumble. And then Methuselah's like, oh, that's just it. And it's like, But that's also, some people just kind of have that brain to be like, oh, yes, what's that, an anagram kind of thing? But, yeah, so there's that. Like I said, there's a lot of death, and death is done on both sides. It's not just all the bad guys getting killed. It's some of the good guys go down as well. Plus, being this book and how it sort of, it's this, I don't say weird, but it's this really neat kind of crossroad to the past as well as to what the future is. Because at least in the early part of the series, as Brian Jakes was writing these out, there's a lot of kind of bouncing back and forth. Like, I think the next book is Mossflower, which goes into the past, but the book after that is Madameo, which is like it's kind of like a continuation of Redwall. It's a like a generation. It's a handful of years, mouse years, handful of mouse years down the road. We'll just say seasons, handful of seasons down the road, and so there's this kind of interesting tug and pull, because not only is he establishing different sorts of habits of how different creatures speak, as well as just some of the quirks of like the hares, as well as some of the oddities with the badgers and that sort of thing. Just the speech patterns of like the moles or something. But then it's also kind of springboarding into what the future may have, with just how the series eventually, like on the back half, goes into just being further and further out there and stuff. So this book will always have a very special place in my heart for getting me into reading and whatnot. And yeah, I really appreciate it. Yeah, there are a few little sections here. If I can read them properly, I will. I will find them and we will read them, and then all that sort of fun stuff. So I will share those with you, and then yeah. So. All right, for one in particular that I wanted to bring up was this conversation that happens between Matthias and Basil Stagg, and this is after Matthias hears about the death of Methuselah. I am not going to read this with any sort of accent. So, Basil hopped nimbly across and perched on Matthias's bed. There, young feller, my lad. Don't you think I know how you feel? Good grief, an old campaigner like me. When I think of the chums I lost in bygone battles, good and true friends they were, but I taught myself to keep a stiff upper whisker, Matthias remained with his back turned upon the hare. But you don't understand, Basil. The soldierly hare snorted. He grabbed Matthias and turned him over so they were face to face. Don't understand? I'll tell you what I don't understand, young chip. I don't understand how a chappie like yourself, who's supposed to be a great warrior, can lie there moping any longer. You're like an old lady otter who just lost a fish. If old Methuselah were here now, he'd chuck a jug of water over you and turf you right out of that bed on your fat little head. Matthias sat up and sniffed. Do you think so, Basil? The hare slapped his injured leg, winced, then laughed aloud. Think so? I know so. Do you imagine that old mouse sacrificed his life so that you could lie about feeling sorry for yourself? Huh? He'd have told you himself. That's not the way of a warrior. Get up, sir. Stir yourself. Make Methuselah proud of you. Matthias's eyes gleamed with a new determination. By golly, you're right, Basil. That's exactly what my old friend would have wanted. I'm sorry. You must think I've behaved like a dreadful young fool. The hare's ears flopped comically as he shook his head. Not at all, my dear feller. Think nothing of it. I must confess that I was a bit like you when I was a leveret, you know. Now, what do you say we get our business of living properly again? I say, I'm positively famished. What about you? And I know that's not the... how to put it? The most... maybe eloquent, or... depending on how you want to put it, just wordy way of going about it. But I think that... sure, is it a quick segment? Yeah, but there's something about that to pick up from loss. And to kind of push in that route. Like, I admit, it does, because of how short that is and whatnot, that there is that turnabout of just kind of being like, and then just going, no. But, I don't know, I guess it's just kind of how my mindset is. If I can be pretty easily jostled out of kind of whatever sort of downward spiral I could be in. If somebody's just kind of like, hey, you goober, what are you doing? Like, but I know that's not everybody. That is what it is. So that's one of them. And the other one I wanted to bring up was a conversation I didn't really mention, but Julian, who is possibly, seemingly, the last in line of the Genevieres, which is a cat. So, and Julian, or Julian, depending on how you want to say those J's, is talking with Matthias after Matthias has finally gotten the sword back. So Matthias has this, is able to get all these other things, but the sword is not where it was left. Kind of got plucked, kind of got stolen, and so a little bit of trouble with that. He goes up to deal with sparrows up in the attic, we'll say, of the abbey, and all that's, or the sparrowhawks and stuff, and all the fun that is, only to find out that the sword was absconded with. It had been dropped by one of them and was taken by an adder. And so Matthias goes and gets the thing back from the adder and slays the snake. Also that sort of fun jazz. And on the way back runs into Julian, who mentions this. So, Matthias, let me give you some good advice. I am much older than you and have seen far more of life. There are not many illusions left to me, and I do not want to shatter your dreams or blight your ambitions, my friend, but I must say what I have to. We squires of Gingiver are an ancient line. In the past, I have seen many such tokens of this weapon. My grandsires own a vast armory full of magnificent and valued battle equipment. No doubt your sword is indeed a beautiful thing. It is a tribute to whoever forged it in bygone ages. There are very few such swords as this one left in the world. But remember, it is only a sword, Matthias. It contains no secret spell, nor holds within its blade any magical power. This sword is made for only one purpose: to kill. It will only be as good or evil as the one who wields it. I know that you intend to use it only for the good of your abbey, Matthias. Do so, but never allow yourself to be tempted into using it in a careless or idle way. It would inevitably cost you your life, or that of your dear ones. So, Martin the Warrior uses the sword only for right and good. This is why it has become a symbol of power to Redwall. Knowledge is gained through wisdom, my friend. Use the sword wisely. So, yeah. So the whole weapon aspect of it, it's nice to kind of bestow that sort of lesson of, hey, this is there is a responsibility that you have now that you are using this sort of thing, and in a very simplistic sense, of just a weapon, yeah. That sort of lesson ought to be distributed for other things. Is that this is a responsibility to, wield whatever it is you have, whether it's the words that bounce out of your mouth or leap from your tongue, or the actions you do in general, is that there's a responsibility to them, and just know what those responsibilities are. Maybe it doesn't have the the finality of death, of cutting someone down, but it could, in the sense, do that. Your words can cut down somebody's dreams. Your actions could cut down somebody's hopes or their own kind of ambitions and stuff like that. So it's something that you have to be responsible for, that sort of thing, and not just simply the tool or what you have. And I like that. I like the idea of it, or maybe I'm just attributing more to it than what there really is. But yeah, no, it's the whole journey for Matthias to collect all the gear. Honestly, it makes me think of Dragon Quest in a very simple way, just because you're collecting the gear of the hero, and then once you get it all, slaying the snake, and then slaying Clooney from attacking and taking over Redwall to make his own and stuff. So yeah, I really enjoy the book. I'm not gonna give it a rating or anything, but if you have people who are into reading and whatnot, it's particularly at the younger age, I certainly say give them a go on it. Like I said, this one will always have a soft, very, very close place in my heart, and yeah, it's an enjoyable read. So that's what I got for this one. Thanks for watching and sticking with. If you've read Redwall, let me know. If you haven't, but you've read some of the other ones, that's always kind of curious. But I mean, it totally would happen because there's a bunch of books. But yeah, so next video on this will be about Mossflower. Good old Mossflower. Yeah, read that one a few times, so hopefully I'll be quick about getting this one out. So that's it. Thanks for watching. Yeah, there you go, Nostalgia King. So take it easy, and I'll see you later. Bye.